Okay, and with that, I think we should switch to English. I will use today in my exercise a presentation that I created recently for a conference where I was a speaker, and of course I will share this link with you. I can copy it to Discord after this lesson. It's not copied into my regular course material. Please excuse that I didn't find that it pays off the work to just copy it. It's also available on the internet, so you will get the link from here. The main topic of today's lesson is a standard which is called Odata. Now, my first question to you is, have you ever heard of Odata? Do you know what Odata is?
Not really.
Not really? You have worked with Odata, believe it or not. You have worked with Odata in the last 3 weeks in exactly that course. Can you remember the Graph API from Microsoft, where we got all the uses from? Can you remember this $filter stuff that you used in the Graph API? That's exactly Odata. That is Odata. Odata is a standard that is heavily used by Microsoft. And of course we can use Odata in our own ASP.NET Core APIs. And why we should do that, why this is super interesting for your project, for your final exam, and for your professional work, this is exactly what we are going to talk about today. And then we will immediately dive into Visual Studio, and I will show you that embedding an Odata feed in your own ASP.NET Core application isn't difficult at all. It will be, I don't know, 20 lines of code, something like this, and then you will have amazing features in your web API. You can save yourself a lot of work. For your diploma thesis, for instance, for your diploma bed, you can save yourself a lot of work because you don't have to write so many endpoints. It will be trivial to build a simple Odata API and you're done. You can immediately focus on the client. So, pay close attention. What we discussed today is really, really relevant. It is a trick that not so many people know about. And of course you can use it in your exam, and of course you can use it in the Matura. Of course, it's part of ASP.NET Core. So, what is this Odata stuff all about? Normally, I would use the blackboard and draw some diagrams here, but we are still in Corona mode, so I decided to use these slides. I love to do interactive drawings on the blackboard because then I can show you how all this stuff works. But let's use the slides, and I hope the visuals here on the slides do their job too. So, what is the problem with Odata? Imagine the following situation. You have a mobile app, for instance, or a web app, it doesn't matter. You have a database here on the right-hand side, and you have a web server, a web API. And what we have done so far, over and over again in ASP.NET Core, is we have built APIs. I asked you to build an API, list all customers, and you will return all customers with all their fields. In real world, a typical customer table doesn't have 10 properties, but it has hundreds of them. So it's a lot of data that you transport if you say list all customers. Imagine that you're working for a business-to-consumer company. They typically have hundreds of thousands of customers. So list all customers has a lot of columns and a lot of rows, a lot of data. And you can imagine that this poor phone here on the left-hand side is overwhelmed by the amount of data. Same is true for a single record. If I ask you, give me a single record, you will return all the columns of this record. Imagine that you just want to display, for instance, in the list, maybe the ID of the customer and the name of the customer. You will still load hundreds of properties of this customer from the server. It will use a lot of bandwidth, it will be slow, and therefore it doesn't work. So what do people do normally? What would you do probably? You would start, oops, sorry, wrong direction, this one. You would start to build specific ASP.NET Core APIs. You would say, hey, let's create a web API where we can say customers by country. That means you can specify a country and filter by country, or maybe sort the list by country. Maybe you want to query just the new customers, where customer creation date greater than whatever. New customers by country. Only those customers created after ordered by country. And then a lot of dots here. You see? In real world, you would end up writing more and more and more and more ASP.NET APIs. For every use case, you will write your own APIs. Maybe somebody would like to fill a drop-down box with all customers. What do you need? Custom ID, customer name. You need a specific web API for that, because you only want to return these two columns. Understand what I mean? You want to filter by that, you want to filter by that. Maybe you want to filter by that and that, or something else. Maybe you would like to do a join with another table, so you don't need to do two queries, but get something back in one go. And I've seen such applications in the real world. Such applications contain an endless amount of code. And the same is true for your SIP project. The same is true for your final project. The same is true for your Matura. If we ask you to build a UI with, let's say, 4 or 5 screens, you will end up writing 4, 5, 6, 10 web APIs. It will work, but it's a lot of work. And this is exactly where OData comes in. Why don't we have this problem here? Let me start my zooming tool. Sorry, I forgot to start it up front here. Why don't we have this problem here? Because we have a query language, right? You don't need to write a separate stored procedure every time you would like to do some specific query in the database. You just can put together here a structured query language select statement, and then send this select statement over to the database. The database will do a lot of its magic and will return exactly what you asked for, right? Wouldn't it be super, super nice if there would be something like SQL for this layer here? Wouldn't it be nice to have a query language with which the client here on the client side could specify in a very flexible way what he wants to filter, to sort by, to join, to group, to sum, to aggregate, just some kind of query language. Very similar language, very similar to the structured query language, to SQL, what we have for databases. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Welcome to the world of OData. That's OData. That's OData. Essentially, there are many standards which solve this problem. The two most important ones that you should definitely remember is, on the one hand side, OData. And today we'll talk about OData. Why is OData specifically relevant for this course? Because OData is the primary standard for this problem in the area of Microsoft-oriented technology. And we do C# in this course. If you do C#, an entity framework, and ASP.NET Core, OData is the most simple way of having a query language from the client to the web server. That's OData. OData has been essentially invented or driven forward by two companies. Microsoft on the one hand side, and can you guess the second one? Probably not. SAP. So whenever you want to access an SAP system, you will also deal with OData. OData is one of the most important standards in that area. So whenever you access SAP, SharePoint, Office 365, Exchange, Active Directory, things like that, you always use OData. There is a different player out there in the market who has exactly the same problem, and this player has invented its own version of a query language from the client to the server, and this query language is called GraphQL. Anybody heard from GraphQL before? Yeah. Do you know who invented it, or who is behind GraphQL? Facebook. So Facebook invented GraphQL. Whenever you use Facebook, behind the scenes, the client uses GraphQL to do flexible queries to the backend. GraphQL is really, really powerful. I like GraphQL a lot. It's a powerful query language. I'm not saying anything against GraphQL. And if this would be a course focusing on React in the front end and Node.js, for instance, in the back end, then we would definitely take a look at GraphQL. But this course focuses on Microsoft technology, and therefore we go for OData. But if you live in a world of, let's say, Node.js or maybe even Go or something like this on the back end and React on the front end, you should definitely check out GraphQL. It solves the exactly same problem. Differently, OData is a so-called RESTful Web API, while GraphQL is not. OData can also write data. GraphQL, well, can, but is often used just for querying. Yeah, that's the reason why we focus on OData. Do you understand the reasoning why this thing is really important? Yeah? Okay. Yeah. What are the primary properties of this query language that we would like to have? It should work similar to SQL. It should be based on HTTP, so we can send it from a browser. We can use reverse proxies, we can use firewalls, we can use SSL and things like that. And it should be platform neutral. If you build a mobile app with Flutter, for instance, you should also be able to use OData, for instance. Additionally, it would be very nice if the Odata endpoint would offer some metadata. If you go to a SQL database, to Oracle, SQL Server, Postgres, something like this, and you fire up a client like the Azure Data Studio or SQL Server Management Studio or Toad or whatever you use, then you can go to the database and ask the database, hey, which tables do you have for me? Which columns are inside of this table? That's called metadata. And a standard like OData should provide the same information. The client, the web server, the web client or the mobile client should be able to go to the web server and say, what tables are available? What columns are available? What are the data types of these columns? Understand what I mean? That's metadata. Otherwise, you have to manually read the documentation, and that's boring. Okay, good. As I said, the standard OData can read and write data, but we will not focus in this course on the write data part. We will just focus on the read part, because this is a rather beginner's course. And the real value of OData is really reading data. You know how to write data. ASP.NET Core, post, delete, put, patch, we have done that, okay? And there is not much difference when you do it with OData. You also implement put, post, patch and all this stuff. So the value of using OData for writing data is not that high. But for reading data, it's a completely different story. There it is really, really important. If you have any questions, ask me. Enter OData. Now, how does this OData stuff work? First, what is OData? OData is a standard. OData is an ISO standard, although it was primarily driven by Microsoft and SAP, or is primarily driven by these two companies. It is an ISO standard. So it is not something that belongs to Microsoft or SAP. If you want to take a close look at OData, you can follow this link here. And you will find here the documentation, as you can see it here. And you can, for instance, read about the protocol and all this stuff. Long documents, partly boring documents, but yeah, the standard is open. This is what I wanted to show you. The current version of the standard is 4.01. And if you take a look at the primary authors and editors, you will see exactly what I told you. It's primarily driven by Microsoft and SAP. It's built on REST. That's, it's interesting for those of you who are interested in software design and protocol design, but yeah, it is like REST. GraphQL, here you have the mentioning of the other standard, is different. So GraphQL is not a RESTful Web API, but that's a theoretical differentiation. We will not talk about it now. Good. Now, what can OData do? Essentially, that. That's OData. This is how you write queries in OData. You just give it the name of the table, customers for instance, and then you can flexibly provide filters, for instance. I just want to see customer equal 15. You can say equal, not equal, greater than, lower than. You can work with dates and string operations like starts with and contains and all this stuff. You can do paging, give me the first 10, jump over the first 10 and give me the next 10, something like this. You can project, so you don't need to return all the columns. You can say, give me just these columns, and it can do a lot more. These queries can become pretty complicated. It's like with SQL, with SQL, right? Remember the first queries that you wrote? They were probably select star from table name, right? Or select column name from table name, something like this. And over time, you have learned what aggregations are, what having is, what subqueries are, and all this stuff. You have learned that in your database courses, right? So simple things are really simple, but the stuff can become pretty complex when you have to deal with complex queries. Same is true for OData. Don't let this example fool you, okay? This is a simple example. It's just like the beginner SQL course, but it can become pretty complex. Don't worry, we will not go into the details here. This is not a database course. For those of you who are interested, you can take a look at all these links down here and take a look at the specifications and find out what OData what treasures OData offers for you, okay? The second thing that we have here is this metadata endpoint. This metadata endpoint is just like asking the server, what can you do? What tables do you have? What columns do these tables have? What data types do these columns have? This is the metadata stuff. I have a question for you. Can you remember another metadata standard that we have used in this course to ask a web server, what operations do you provide? We have used a metadata standard for that. Can you remember Swagger? Open API specification? Remember that? Yeah. It would be so nice if OData would also use Swagger and Open API specification, but it doesn't. Why? You might ask yourself, why did they invent a new metadata format? Why didn't they just use the existing standard? The answer is pretty simple. When OData was invented, there was no Swagger. So OData is pretty old. OData is established. OData is not something fancy new. GraphQL is much newer, much fancier. People are talking a lot about it because it's rather new. OData is rather old technology, but it's robust. It's like SQL. Nobody talks about SQL anymore. Go to a conference. You will rarely see some SQL talks, but SQL is awesome. It's so powerful, but it's not the cool kid on the block anymore. Same is true with OData. SAP, boring. SharePoint, boring. Outlook, oh, boring. It's just email. Give me something fancy new. But at the end of the day, in companies, and you do it probably too, you store a lot of documents in a system like SharePoint, and many companies are using SAP for their ERP business, and a lot of people use emails and do appointments in calendars. Yes, it's not fancy new, but it is used all over the world. So if people tell you, hey, why are you going to use OData? It's such an old standard. Yes, it's old but established. Okay? So don't get the wrong impression. GraphQL is cooler and newer, but it's also not that widely used and not that, let's say, mature. Okay? Good. It is mature. It's not bad. Absolutely not. It's a very good standard, but OData has been around for quite a while. And this is why they invented their own metadata standard. Here you see some more complex queries. See? Let's take a look at these queries. Give me a list of all categories, but only return those product categories where there are products with at least 2 products having a price greater than 5, and here is the 2. You see? Which product categories, bikes, cars, whatever, which product categories have products with at least 5 as its price, and we need to have 2 of them. That would be a subquery in SQL. Subquery with an aggregation of count. Or here, give me all the orders where somebody ordered an item with a quantity greater than 100. Another subquery. Understand what I mean? Good. Yeah, question.
With the greater than, is the number included, or so is it greater than and equal to 5?
No.
Or
No, that would be greater equal.
Okay.
That would be GTE, I think GE.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Good. Nice. Now, we can take a look at existing, let me quickly show you that, at existing OData APIs. Let me copy this one out. You don't need to follow along to that one because we will do that with our own feed. That is just a small one, a small sample, so you get an idea. Let me quickly save that. Good. This here is an open service. It's the so-called trip pin rescue service. And if we take a look at this service, it will hopefully return if we go to metadata. That's an open OData service that everybody can query. It's just provided by the OData organization to experiment with OData. We will write something like that today in this course on our own. But first, let's take a look at OData stuff. Now, the first thing that we do here is we are just accessing the $metadata. And if we take a look at the metadata that we get back here, you see here, we get back, okay, this service offers, for instance, a table which is called person. The primary key is the username. But we also have a first name, a last name, a middle name, a gender, an age, and the age is of type int64. You get the idea? If I just give you this URL, you have no idea what this URL can do. And by just appending $metadata, we get back a lot of interesting information. Now we know what this thing is capable of doing. Now we can do some queries. The first query is, let me zoom in a little bit. The first query is select star from people. Click on it, and it will return, hopefully, a list of people. You see? Here we have Mr. Russell White. He is male. He has 2 email addresses. He lives here. This is demo data. This is not real data. And then we have the next one. Scott Ketchum. He is male. This is his email address, and so on and so on. You get the idea, right? That was simple. We can ask for a single person using its primary key by using this syntax. This is important in OData. We will use that today. If you put it in brackets here, you just add the primary key here. So if you run that guy, you will return exactly one person, queried by primary key. We can also query, for instance, here, the airports. We have a list of airports here, and here we are asking for the San Francisco International Airport by using this ICAO code, whatever that is. I think you get the idea. Just the primary key. But now comes the important part. Check out these 2 differences. If I run the second query, I only get back the name. You see it? And here you see the value of OData. If you build a web API, a web client, or a mobile client, and you just need to display the name of this one airport, it doesn't make sense to get all these information items, all this stuff, just to pick out the name and display the name on the UI. You're wasting bandwidth. And OData gives you the flexibility to just query what you really need. And the beautiful thing is, wait until we build it our own. Do you know how complex it will be in C# to offer all this functionality for our own table? A single line of code. Just one. And all these functionality are yours. Do you now understand why this is a powerful standard? It definitely is. So, you can do complex queries too. You see here, people. First name equals Scott. If I run that one, I will get back multiple people whose name is Scott. Come on. Did I run it? Yeah, here it is. See? Here you see more complex queries. I don't think that I need to do all of them. I think you already got the idea. We can say give us the first 2 people. We will just return, we will just get Here you see inside this array, we'll just get 2 records. We can skip the first 18 and then take the next one. So if you want to build something like paging, first 10, next 10, next 10, you can do that with top and skip. And you can also do some, as you can see here, some aggregation information, like give me the number of people, for instance. So if you build a paging system and you would like to say, here you see the first 10 items out of 260, then you get the 260 by doing this count operation. Yeah?
As a front-end developer, you still need to know which tables are available or which queries you could run.
It depends. It depends. If you are a really smart and good developer, you can simply run this $metadata and then build a UI which can dynamically adapt to what the feed offers you.
Okay.
You could build a query builder, an interactive query builder. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
But in real world, in your simple projects like you do here in school, you typically, as the front-end developer, look manually on this $metadata result. You use your eyes to take a look at this one. You design your front-end, and then you simply craft the URLs by hand. Let me show you an example. That was, in fact, a really good question. Let me show you a generic client, which will maybe give you a little bit more of background. Do you know Power BI? Have you ever heard of Power BI before?
No.
No? You've never heard of Power BI? Oh my God. Then this lesson already paid off. Definitely take a look at Power BI. It's one of the hottest topics that you can currently work in or use when you do some business out in the open. It's called Power BI. And this Power BI stuff can be retrieved free from the Microsoft Store. So you just go to the Microsoft Store, you download it. I will show it to you here. I have it on my desktop computer at home, but here on my school laptop, I don't have it installed, so let's quickly install it. If you want, you could try it on your own. Power BI, it's one of the greatest BI data analysis tools that are currently available. Have you ever heard of the company Gartner, which provides market information? Have you heard the term of the Gartner Magic Quadrant?
No.
Anybody in distance learning heard from the Gartner Magic Quadrant? No? Another thing. Sorry, we have to quickly jump into a different topic because I really think this is important. Now see the Gartner Magic Quadrant. It's a way for a company to assign to describing, or a way of Gartner to describing the current market. Let's take a look at that one. That is a typical Gartner Magic Quadrant. It has 2 axes. The first axis, here you see it, it's the x-axis. It's called completeness of vision. So the company, how complete is their product vision? What is their view on the market? Do they have innovative ideas? Do they come up with brand new stuff which really is useful for their customers? This is completeness of vision. But it's one thing having ideas and a vision, but it's another thing of being able to execute. That's the second way here. Do they have the money to make their ideas real? Do they have the power? Do you have the employees who have the capabilities of really implementing their products? And this company, Gartner, they are a market research company. And for many, many topics out there, they are publishing such magic quadrants. So imagine you are a CEO or CTO, a Chief Technology Officer in a larger company. And your company needs to buy a data analysis tool. There are hundreds, if not thousands out there. Which one are you going to take a look at? All of the thousands? Probably not. You will never find the right product because you will be busy for the next 10 years just looking at sales presentations. And after 10 years, the market has changed and you can start from scratch. So what many people do is they look at Gartner Magic Quadrants. They take a look at these quadrants and say, I only want to take a look at the leader quadrant. Because those are the companies who really have a vision and who really have the ability to put this vision into real products. You also might say, I need to take a look at that ones, because those other companies, they might not have the biggest vision, but they are really strong in execution. Maybe they are cheaper. Or you might take a look at that ones. They have the great vision, but they are maybe small. So you want to buy a small player. You can do that. Let's make an example here. If we take a look at the Magic Quadrant for business intelligence, and let's take a look if I find the right one. I think there is a new one for 2021, if I can remember that correctly. Let's take a look. Yes, February 2021. This is a typical Gartner Magic Quadrant. Okay? And here you see what we are talking about. There are 3 companies in the leaders quadrant here. And Microsoft is really, really doing a great job. A few years ago, they weren't present here. They bought some companies and they did a lot of investment in this area. And today, they are by far the market leader. They combine the most complete vision and the most powerful ability to execute in a single product. And this product is called Power BI. And this is why so many people, so many companies are nowadays buying or using Power BI. Those, I know these products too, they are great. Tableau is a great company. Qlik is really a great company, and there are other great companies, but currently, really, Power BI is nailing it. So if you want to have a tool with which you can build great dashboards and visualizations and interactive data analysis, even machine learning, artificial intelligence, all this stuff can be done with Power BI. And the good news for you is the desktop client, which can be gotten from the store here, it's free. So Power BI costs money if you want to have it for your team in the cloud, but if you are willing to install the desktop app, it's completely free for everybody. Okay? And this is what I wanted to show you. So remember 2 things. They are not part of the exam. It's just for your information. Gartner Magic Quadrants. They are available for all big topics. You can take a look at the Gartner Magic Quadrants for ERP systems, for cloud systems, and things like that. And the second thing, Power BI. So as you can see, here I have my Power BI. I can now start it. Power BI, here it is. Let's do that one and then we'll do a break, okay? That is still the answer to your question. Yep. Do I need upfront as a developer know what this OData feed is capable of doing? Okay? And Power BI obviously doesn't know what our OData feed is capable of doing, because the developers at Microsoft, they don't know what we are building. So, come on. The first start always takes a while. I should have installed that before. I'm sorry for that, but I didn't anticipate that this might be really interesting for you. You see, this is Power BI. I will not show you the details about Power BI. There is an endless number of really cool videos out there in YouTube. I'm also not an expert in Power BI. I have solid base knowledge in OData and in Power BI, but I'm not an expert. And here you see, I can get data from an OData feed. So I can go here, and then the system will ask me, well, tell me the URL of the OData feed. Now I go back, and I will take again this demo feed here that is linked in the slides that I will give you, this trip pin. It's a travel agency. And I click OK, and what's now going to happen, OData will go to the $metadata endpoint and query OData and ask OData, what do you offer? What can I get from you? See? And now here, just like with a query editor, we get all the REST APIs. So now we can say, okay, I want to get the people, because I would really like to do a query about all these people. You see? Here you have it. And then you can just click on load, and it will load through OData all this data into Power BI. And then we can do some awesome queries and awesome dashboards. That's the idea of OData. Of course, you could access the database directly if you are allowed to access the database. But for many systems, like for instance, Graph API, for Microsoft will not let you query their databases directly because of security reasons. But they give you an OData feed. With Power BI, you can access Graph API if you want. And you see, then we could, for instance, say, I don't know, give me, what do we have? Here, give me a chart here where we say the gender. Let's do that one. I think that makes maybe sense. Let's see. No, of course not. The legend. And we do, what was the, I think it was the, let's take the username. That was the username. Here is it. Come on, count. And we see in this demo data, we have a nice 50-50 splits between male and female. Okay? So yes, this is demo data, but I think you get the idea, right? Yes, and if I want, I could, for instance, here, oops, I didn't want to do that, sorry. I would like to add another query here, and I would like to add the first name and the last name. You see that one? Maybe let's zoom in a little bit. Here, oops, that one. Yeah, and if I click here, you see I immediately get a filter here. If I click here, I immediately get a filter here. If I remove the filter, I get all the filters here. And you can imagine that you can build really cool dashboards with just a few clicks. Imagine what you can do here. So in your mind, you should have a vision where you say, okay, I now imagine my final year project. So the project that you're working on. And you just offer the data that you have in your precious database through an Odata endpoint. And then you build a really cool dashboard with Power BI. And in your next customer presentation, you will show this dashboard and you don't have to write any code for it. It just works. And OData enables you to do the filtering and sorting and all the stuff in your web API without having to write code. Got the idea? Yeah. Do you like that? Power BI is really powerful. You should definitely check it out. It will pay off. Good. At this point in the course, you should now have an idea why OData is relevant. So we will now do a break, okay? After the break, we will quickly repeat how to set up a new ASP.NET API with Entity Framework. Why? Because we have to practice. Nothing new here. We will spend half an hour or something like this to set up a new project. Why? The exam is coming up. It will just be practice, okay? And then, after this practice hour, we will add OData. So once we have the API, I will show you 3-4 easy steps to add OData to our ASP.NET Core project. And then, if you want, we can use our Power BI to build a dashboard on top of the OData feed that we have then built in ASP.NET Core. Got it? Good? Good. Let's do that. So, it's now approximately 5 minutes after 9. Let's do 10 minutes. And let's continue at 9:15, okay? For those people who are watching at home, we will do 10 minutes break, and at 9:15 we will continue.